So, you've finished a first draft, but a first draft does not a novel make. The first draft is an important step on the way to a finished novel, but there's a step in between those steps that you must take, and that is the crucial step of revision. That intro could have used some revision. Revision is a pretty big topic, but today I want to take you through the major steps that you should follow when revising a first draft into a more polished novel. While revision is almost a universal process, most writers revise what they write at some point, there is no universal process that works for every writer. What I'm aiming to do today is go through the major steps that make up revision, some of the processes that you may or may not want to employ, and also at least a logical way to order these different steps. Part of learning revision is learning what works for you, so adapt, change, and revise the process until you've found something that works. The first and most crucial step of revision is to wait and do nothing. As we all know, doing nothing and waiting around for your problems to go away is a great way to solve most of them. You'll see this advice all over the place, that when you finish a draft, you should set it aside and not look at it or start revision for some amount of time. During that time, you should still be writing, but you want to be working on different stuff and leave that draft alone. Different people will give you different time frames, from as little as 2 weeks all the way up to like 6 months or a year. I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all length or a one-length-fits-all length. I don't think there's a specific amount of time that you need to leave a draft for, but what you want to do is leave it for enough time for some important processes to happen. A few things happen when you take time away from a draft. For one thing, it will give you a break from that story. So if you're tired or burned out or bored of working on that project, you get a bit of a break and you can sort of rest up and come back to it when you're more fresh. Also, when you come back to the project, you'll be a little bit less familiar with it, and that lack of familiarity can often spur new ideas or new perspectives, which is a lot harder to do when you're stuck in the weeds on a project. Another consideration is that in the time away from the project, you're still learning and growing as a writer. So if you wait 6 months to come back to the draft, you're starting that revision with 6 more months of skill built up. You are a better writer than when you finished the draft. Now we get to the next step where we actually begin revising once you've left the draft for however long you want to leave it for, and that is to evaluate the draft and come up with a plan. I think one of the worst mistakes you can make with revision, although this probably works for some writers, but I think one of the worst mistakes you can do is just kind of jump in and start revising. Having a bit of a plan and understanding of what needs to be changed in the novel really goes a long way. Most people will tell you to read through the entire draft before beginning to revise. This is the writerly equivalent of tasting your food as you cook. You can't tell how much salt something needs unless you taste it, just like you can't tell what a novel needs unless you read through it. Now, a novel is such a long story, and there's often so much information to keep track of that just reading straight through might not be enough. That's why I highly recommend you create some kind of document as you read the draft to keep track of everything. This can take several forms. Some people just take notes on every chapter, stuff they like, stuff they want to change. I personally have experimented with creating a sort of reverse outline where you summarize what happens in every scene and the order the scenes happen in to create a sort of summarized reference document that you can refer back to. And also, as you're doing that, you probably take some notes on what's working or what isn't working, that kind of thing. You can get as elaborate with this as you want and build diagrams of arcs and when characters get introduced and map out the tone and mood of each scene. You can build one of those walls with all the pictures and the thumbtacks with threads connecting different things. Go nuts if you want to go nuts with this sort of thing. What's important here is that you build out a plan for how you're going to revise the draft, something that outlines what changes you want to make based on your experience with reading through that draft. At this point, you'll start to get an understanding of what work is ahead of you. You can start thinking about how to resolve some of these problems and the changes that you want to make. Maybe a character needs to get introduced sooner. Maybe an arc is resolving too late in the story. Maybe there's a big plot hole that you discovered in chapter 4. Maybe chapter 18 is just really, really boring. All of this needs to be considered at the level of the entire novel, which means you need to take a sort of 10,000-foot view of your story. This is why a comprehensive read through, making sure that you have lots of notes, is so important. There is a time and a place for focusing on individual scenes and making them work as best you can, but you really can't do that until a lot of the bigger stuff is figured out. The next step, once you have a plan for what needs to change, is to prioritize those changes and decide how you want to work through them. Generally, you want to work from the biggest changes down to the smaller changes. Like, sure, you can go and fix all the typos in chapter 5, but if chapter 5 is getting massive rewrites, or if it's just getting cut from the novel entirely, then fixing typos is a waste of time. Generally, you want to start with big changes like cutting entire chapters or completely rewriting chapters or writing new chapters that weren't written before, and then get into more minor changes like prose improvements or fine-tuning spelling and grammar. Different writers will go through this in different ways. I personally like to work through this in a linear fashion, making the changes, all of the changes that I've decided to a chapter as I reach that point in the book. So what I'll often do is I'll make a new document and I'll start copying chapters over in the order that I've decided they're going to be in. If a chapter needs major rewrites, I will rewrite it when I reach that point in the book. If it's getting more minor rewrites like prose tuning, I might go through and do some of those, but I move through the book in a sort of linear fashion. Other people will start with sort of the developmental things. They'll rewrite every chapter that's getting rewrites, and then they'll go through the book again and do more minor changes. So they don't work in a sort of linear fashion. They do multiple passes over the book to fix different things. Still, other writers might go arc by arc or character by character. I've heard some people do that where they'll rewrite all of the characters' chapters because it allows them to get a more consistent voice for that character. Really depends on how your novel is structured, really depends on how you like to work. As you work through, assuming you're going from the start to the end of your novel, it can be helpful to keep a sort of moving list of what you want to change and focus on. Again, this can take different forms, but just keeping track of what's happened in the last few scenes and what needs to happen in the next few scenes, that sort of thing. For all of this revision guide stuff or outlines that you're creating as you go through your revision, I would make sure that you're capturing enough information to be useful, but not an excessive amount of information. If you find it's a major pain in the ass to do these outlines or to keep a lot of notes, then don't feel obligated to do it. Remember, the point of this is to develop a process that works for you. Some people are really good at keeping what they need to do straight in their heads, and they don't need guides and notes and outlines. Other people find that having this stuff helps them stay organized and not miss anything. Don't feel obligated to use a certain outline structure or note-taking structure just because somebody tells you it's the best one to do. Figure out what works best for you. So what do you do once you're finished revising? What do you do once you've revised the whole draft? Well, the simple answer is to start over. Let the new draft sit for a time, give it a read through again, and figure out if it needs more revision. I would say if you're on to your second or third draft, then it's definitely time to get another set of eyes on the project. This is where you could engage with critique partners, maybe an editor, probably a little bit too early for beta readers, but you want somebody to take a look at the project who isn't you. A critique partner will do a similar thing to what you do. They will read through the novel and point out problems. Once you have this, you can then go through and do another revision pass to address the problems that they've pointed out. There's no set number of revisions that a novel should go through. I think what you want to avoid is going over a novel too many times and doing endless rewrites to the point where it never gets done. Ideally, what should happen is if you revise it a second time, the problems you find should be way more minor. The scope and number of problems that you're finding should go down with each revision pass. Arguably, the simple answer is that revision is done when you run out of problems to fix, but no novel is going to be perfect, and you're probably always going to find stuff that needs to be improved. And if you try to make a novel perfect, you're just never going to finish it. Speaking of making things perfect, or not finishing things, the conclusion to this video is neither perfect nor finished because I didn't write one. So there you have it. I would love to hear about your own revision process in the comments down below. If you want to see more stuff like this, you can check out all my other writing advice related videos and subscribe to my channel. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.